TED Talk on Joynity, which is the Joy Trinity, and it's quite in depth, but it's also all that anyone ever needs to know. It's literally the top level knowledge of everything else. Everything else falls under this umbrella, and I know that's been said before, but we're going to get into it and you're going to see exactly what I mean. And it's going to be a fun ride, and this is the only lecture you really ever need to listen to. Not because it's necessary, because everyone already knows and understands it. It being everything inside of everybody, they're already experiencing it, they already are it, they're already living it. Every action we do is it, which I'm going to get into. It sounds very metaphysical, which perhaps it is. But this is the only information that anyone actually needs to know, and it doesn't just impact every part of life, it is life itself. And what all religions and philosophies were aiming towards, not to hype it up at all, but this is what everyone has been focusing upon, and it's the ultimate answer. This is the top level knowledge again, and beyond this there is nothing. This is the totality of reality, experience, the answer of answers, the goal of goals. So that's what we're going to get into, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Alright, so first we're going to start with ontology. What ontology is it's the study of being, and what beingness is, what isness is. And so what we'll start off with is heat, light, information. This is where we'll start. So what are these each have a particle, right? So the electron is related to heat. The photon is related to light. And the bit is related to information. And there's a lot more of these, but these are some obvious examples of ontology. Let me spell that for you, actually. O-N. Ontology. Okay? And so, when we talk about reality, reality is ontologically positive. It's only measured in real substances, not lacks or absences, because you can't hold nothing, you can't grab a whole and turn it into an object, you can't build a house with nothing or absence or lack, correct? And so what is a word for the lack of each of these, right? So what's the lack of heat? That's cold. Okay? And what is the lack of light? That is dark. What is the lack of information? Ignorance. Now, do the lacks have any substance? Do they have a particle or an object? Obviously, no. When you decrease heat, cold is the experience, but there's no cold on. There's no cold on particle, O-N. When you decrease light, there's just less light. There's no dark on. There's no dark particle. When you decrease information, you just get less information, but there's no ignorance on. O-N. There's no lack particle. So that's what we mean by ontology, is reality is ontologically positive. You have to measure it and talk about it in terms of substance. And so ontological positivism, that's reality is measured in substances. So here we can see there's a heat particle, there's a light particle, there's an information particle, but there is no cold on, there's no dark on, there's no ignorance on, because those are lacks. And through language we can create mental objects out of nothingness, but they don't actually exist. There's no substance to them. You can't have a handful of dark or a handful of cold or a handful of ignorance. Obviously, these things can be experienced because you can have so few electrons or so few photons or so little information that it becomes experientially cold, dark, or ignorant. But you can't grab a lack or a whole because it doesn't exist. You can only grab a substance. And so that's the starting point of this talk, is ontology. And there's a lot more examples of this. So some other examples of this, and there's many, perhaps infinite, but some other ones is there's only activity or motion, there's no time. Time is just a lack of motion or activity. There's also only objects or matter. There is no space. Space is just the lack of objects and matter. You can't grab a handful of space or time. Even though scientists wrongly call our universe a space-time continuum, it's actually an object-motion continuum, because you can't turn our universe into a lack and call it a thing. But that's what scientists do, even though it's wrong. So similarly, back to ontology, there is only wealth and appreciation. There is no poverty, because poverty is a lack of wealth, right? You can't grab poverty, but you can grab wealth. Wealth is a tangible thing. There is only life and consciousness. There is no death, because again, death is a lack. You can't grab death, but you can grab life or consciousness. Perhaps not literally, but you know what I mean. It has substance. Consciousness is, some say it's our neurology, some say that our brains are actually antenna for a consciousness field, but regardless of the view you hold, consciousness is a thing, whereas death is a lack. There's also only health and clarity. There is no disease. Disease is a lack of health. So you see how ontology applies to everything. Reality is ontologically positive, and you cannot grab a whole or a lack or turn it into an object. You can't take cold and build a house out of it. You get what I'm saying. And the most important one, the most important version of this is joy. Because that's what everything in life, which we'll get into in a sec, all of life is aimed towards joy. No matter what, we'll get into that later, but no matter what you're doing, your goal is joy, whether you know it or not. And so this is the beginning of the 6 joyful truths that we're going to get into next, which builds up the Joy Trinity foundation, or cosmology, whatever you want to call it. And so we have joy, and we would have to turn it into, imagine a particle for it, so we could call it a joycicle, a joy particle. Equally valid would be a jatum, a joy atom, doesn't really matter what we call it. I call it a joycicle. And what's the lack of joy, or joyicles? That would be suffering, pain, misery, trauma. But in the same vein, as we can talk about joy as being ontologically positive in reality, you cannot grab suffering, pain, misery, or trauma. Like here, I have a handful of trauma. You just can't have it. Same as the other ones. You can't have a cold on, you can't have a dark on, you can't have an ignorance on, you can't have a suffer on, a pain on, misery on, or a trauma on. Because that's a lack of joy. Reality is ontologically positive. Keep that in mind. And so that's the first shell or layer of this cosmology that we're creating here. And so we may as well jump into we've covered ontology pretty well. So now we're going to jump into the actual 6 joyful truths, which is a playful spin on Buddha's 4 noble truths, which I would actually say is ontologically 100% inaccurate, because his first noble truth was life is suffering, and we've just laid out that suffering actually cannot literally ontologically exist. Its reality is not ontologically negative. It just cannot be that way. Misery cannot exist just as much as cold, dark, or ignorance can't. You can experience things because you can experience a lack of real substances. It's the difference between a rainforest and a desert. You know, a rainforest has too much water almost, and a desert has 5 drops per mile, perhaps. You know, not very much. And so you can absolutely experience a lack, but a lack is still just small good. You can't turn a lack into an object. Because a desert, in a sense, doesn't really exist in and of itself. It's just a lack of water or other objects that create life and sustain it. And so a desert would actually fall into this ontology too, you know? In terms of natural life supportingness, you would have a rainforest over here. Let's make that metric life. So you have like a rainforest, and at the far end, you have a desert or a wasteland. And so a desert's not really a thing, it's just a lack of other things. But it's a good visual because everyone understands what a desert is. But as an object, it doesn't exist. It's just a lack of other things. Just like all our other lacks. So, that's the ontology section. Now let's get into the 6 joyful truths. Alright, so now we're starting our part on the 6 joyful truths. Alright, so again, this is like a playful remix of Buddha's 4 noble truths, but I would call them not so noble because they make suffering the center of existence and they build a cosmology around it, whereas our cosmology is the complete opposite. Instead of his life is suffering, we're going to, I've already proven that suffering can't exist. Not just that it doesn't, but it cannot, because it's a lack. It can be experienced, but it's not a substance. And so our remix of that would be life is joy. Reality, even more so, reality is joy. And so we're going to build some more here, and it's going to be exciting and awesome. Alright, so the first joyful truth. All action is joy. And what that means is that everything everyone does, everything everyone wants, all activity, all goals and desires is joy. Let's look at a mother who cares for her kid. Why does she care for her kid? Because it propagates her genes, it makes her feel feminine, be a nurturing mother, gives her self-esteem, gets approval from her parents for being a good daughter and being a good mother. She gets to see life grow. And why does she want all that? Because it gives her joy. Someone who wants to be a millionaire. Why do they want that? Because they want status, they want to get a good sexual partner, romantic partner, whatever. They want nice things, they want to travel, they want to have a good life, they want to be happy, have lots of friends. And why do they want all those things? Joy. More extreme. A serial killer or Hitler. Doesn't really matter, it's the same thing. Why did Hitler do everything he wanted to do? To get revenge for World War I, to build up his country's self-esteem, to get respect from the international community, to kill an enemy or many enemies, whatever. And why did he want to do that? To build his own self-confidence, because he felt worthless. He was homeless for a long time. He wanted to build his own self-esteem. And why did he want that? Because of joy. So no matter the situation, whether you're a loving mother or you want to be successful in business, or you're Hitler, every action, regardless of the outcome, is always based and rooted behind it. And yes, the intention behind it is joy, and the end goal beyond it is also joy. It's always joy. All activity is joy. And so that's our first joyful truth, is everything both ahead of and behind, in fact, all activity is just joy. And I think if we stop there, that's pretty amazing too, is that everything is positively intended, whether it's super good like a Jesus, or average like someone trying to live a simple life, or even the most evil, heinous people. Joy is behind it all. It's all rooted in joy. That alone is kind of amazing. That joy is our default. Joy runs human life, and in fact all existence. So, number 2. If number 1 is true, if joy is everywhere, perhaps it is a particle. Because how could something be everywhere unless it physically existed? So, that's our second joyful truth. The third, if our universe is made of joyicles, which means joy monism, and what monism is that all of reality is made of a single substance, monism. And so joy monism is that all of reality is made of only one substance called joy. So if our universe is made of joyicles, where our universe came from must also be the joy source. So it's all joyicles. Then our source must be the joy source. I.e., if our universe is so rich in joy, then wherever universes come from, including our own, must be the source of joy, and it must be even more wealthy and rich in joy, perhaps infinitely so, that it overflows into creating physical universes. That's where our universe must have come from. Some people call this God. I'm going to get into my view of what that means. So that's the third joyful truth. The fourth joyful truth. So fractals are the shape of nature. And if you don't know what fractal is, don't be alarmed. Fractals simply mean self-similar across all scales and infinite branching. And so that is like trees. They branch infinitely, like a leaf looks like the whole tree. A pine cone looks like a pine tree. Babies look like adults. Our lungs are fractal. They branch infinitely. That's why we can fit 2 basketball courts worth of surface area in about 2 feet of volume, because of the infinite branching. Roads are like this even. Human populations are fractal. River systems, mountain ranges, wealth disparity geographically. Basically everything in nature is fractal. Galaxies, even the whole universe, you can see has infinite branching, just like our neurology. If you look at a brain map, it's infinitely branching, just like the universe is. So fractals are the shape of nature. And so in this higher dimension that births universes, because our universe came from somewhere, if reality can birth one universe, why would it just stop at one? So there's likely many, perhaps infinite. And so what this higher dimension probably is a fractal, like a tree. So the higher dimensional tree. Alright, and so a joy tree, so to speak, is also apt because it answers what dark energy and dark matter are unlike the common bubble theory, our universe is a bubble. So our universe, what grows on trees is fruits. And so if we think that fractals are the shape of nature, then the higher dimensional place where universes are born is probably a tree, and what grows on trees is fruits. So what would a universe be? A joy fruit. And it also explains what dark energy, dark matter is, as I said. So we think of our universe as a fruit instead of a bubble. Then dark energy, which is 68% of our universe, it's the joy juice expanding our universe, or joy fruit. Dark energy, which is 27% of our universe, is the joy pulp. It holds galaxies together and gives structure to our universe. And then the 5% of ordinary matter, I would call this the joy skin on our fruit, and that is the physical stuff we can see and interact with. That's humans, pets, trees, stars, planets, and galaxies. This is the ordinary matter. This is the surface, the joy skin on this joy fruit. Joy fruit. Alright, and we come to the sixth and final joyful truth. So if our world is actually completely made of joy, we could call our world, or even more expansively, this physical universe, this joy fruit, we could call it Joytopia. Because it's physical reality that is entirely made of joy, as we explained. So Joytopia, we call it our planet or the universe, whatever, but this Joytopia comes from the joy fruit, which is our universe. Alright? And this joy fruit grows on the joy tree. That's the structure. And the joy tree is made entirely of Joyicles. So now we've got three things, a Joy Trinity, if you will. And so this is where the joy, we just combine into one word, Joynity. And we could even go further and apply our universe's ratios to this higher dimensional place where universes are born. And so that would put, if we apply the dark energy percent, we would put Joyicles at 68% of this higher dimension, the joy tree at 27%, because that would be like the dark matter in our universe, and then Joytopia, this is all the joy fruits that are growing on this tree, at 5%. So that would be the physical manifestation of it. So that's the six joyful truths, and you can see how most of this higher dimension, if we map across, which is not too far-fetched, because everything is fractal, and so things are self-similar across all scales, so it would repeat. And so we can use what we know in our universe and apply it to a higher dimension where universes are born. And so most of reality, most of the Joy Trinity, cosmology, would be in Joyicles at 68%. The Joy Tree would be the second most at 27%. It would be the structure of this multiverse. And then the physical joy fruits, or what I call Joytopia, would just be the 5%. So the physical is actually the smallest part of this joy cosmology, which is very interesting, because that means most of it, you'd almost think of it as gas. The Joyicles are like joy gas, the joy tree is like joy liquid, and then Joytopia is the physical solid. So most of it, most joy is still in unformed, unshaped, pure gas form, and then the tree would be the next most at liquid. It's like a liquid flowing tree of joy. And then the physical is almost like the ice, where there's actual physical friction. But just because we're the least in this cosmology doesn't mean we're the worst, because through that friction of the physical joy rubbing together, new joys come out of that friction. That's the point of it, is the friction causes, through the roughness of the physicality, it causes new joy to be birthed through the physical, because if it just stayed in gas form, it'd just be perfect gaseous joy, if you will, always, and nothing new would ever happen. But because of the phase changes of joy, the roughness and the friction of the physical causes new joys to arise that never would have occurred to the higher dimensional joys. And so that's our part to play, is through our physicality, through our challenges and the roughness of the physical experience, we birth new joys out of our challenges. And so that's the part we play in the greater cosmology. So that is let me draw a picture as well. So here's like a joy tree, and then the fruits would only be like 5%. The tree is 27%. Just to give like a visual of what this higher, and each of the fruits obviously is universes. We could say it's many or just infinite, whatever. But then the pure gaseous joyicles would be 68%, so they would actually dominate. The pure, unshaped joyicles are the biggest picture. Just like in our universe, dark energy is the biggest picture, and we're just using the same ratios and applying it to this higher dimension because we can't measure it at the moment, but it's reasonable to use the same metrics. Yeah, so 68% joy in gas form, 27% in tree form, so some liquid shape. It's a flowing tree of liquid joy, and then the little dots, that's 5% of the joy fruits or our universes, which I call Joytopia. Because what else would you call this physical reality entirely made of joy? And so that is the 6 joyful truths. This is a shorter one, so this is the percents of current religions, how they might hold up to the Joy Trinity or Joynity, as I'll just call it going forward. How other religions hold up to the Joynity cosmology. So obviously, I'll leave the picture up, but I'll take away the 6 joyful truths for a second. And the only reason that Joynity is 100% perfection, okay, so because what is a better idea that exists anywhere in the universe than matter and reality itself is literally made of the best thing there is, joy. Like nothing tops that. So that is the best thought that someone could think, is that reality equals joy. That's the best thought that can be thought. So that's why this is 100%. Because that's all it states. It doesn't state any other dogmas. It's not muddy at all. It's just a perfect cosmology, truth, belief system, whatever you want to call it. Fact, reality. It's the highest fact, the highest reality, the highest truth. So that's why it's 100% perfect. And so we have a lot of belief systems in the world. So what would be the next best? I would put Hinduism at 90%, because it's largely joy-based. The root of it is that reality is made of Brahma, which is God, and God is equivalent to bliss or joy, and so it's very nearly perfect, except it has a lot of caste trauma. It gets obsessed with people are stuck at the level they're at. Karma, so this is turning a lack into an object. Karma is just another word for effort. and one step removed from pain. And so it's turning a pain and work, which are lacks, into objects, which is why it's very good, but it's not perfect. Buddhism, I would put it next. And this isn't like subjective, this is just like based on their own beliefs, like how perfectly joyful they are. And I think even they would agree that Hinduism is largely joyful, Buddhism is largely focused on joy, but it's still, it turns voidism and emptiness and almost nihilism into things. And so Buddhism, I would put at 80%. Because it's very good, but it's still, I mean, its first noble truth is life is suffering, and it talks about karma as well. And its ultimate goal is the annihilation of all life on Earth, because it thinks physical life is bad and that we should try to never be reborn here. Like, if we resolve all our karma, we'll just never be born here. We'll always stay in the pure zone. Which there's some validity to that, but hating the physical does play a part in the cosmos. And so just saying that life should not exist is obviously not a great idea. So that's Buddhism. Christianity I would put next at 60%. Because there's a lot of love, there's divine love, there's Jesus' love, but there's also, I would say 40% is based on guilt and fear. The whole hell thing is, do what I say or you'll burn in hell forever. And if you don't accept Jesus, you'll burn in hell forever. And if you sin, you have to feel worthless and feel guilty for a long time until you become a better person. And so there's a lot of unontological language and ideas. Plus there's so much dogma. It's built around good people dying and killing themselves. Not a great thing. You know, if my friend's son was a model citizen, he killed himself for others, I don't think anyone would say that's a noble thing. Like, suicide is not good ever, even if it's Jesus. I don't think that's a controversial statement, but people sometimes mix up like common sense with like dogma they've been taught since childhood, and the two shall never meet. But there is a lot of guilt and fear in Christianity, and so I would say it's not perfectly joyful. Islam, put it 50%. There's a lot of sacredness in Islam, like surrender to a higher power. That's exactly what Islam is. Like, it means surrender to Allah, I think. But there's also a lot of rigidity and a lot of fear. And we don't really need to get into all the details, but it has a lot of good, but it's also kind of like 50-50 in terms of dogma and mixed. It's a mixed bag, essentially. Science, I would put even lower at 45%. Because science has no heartbeat at all. It has no soul. It's just it's mechanistic. It explains how things work physically, but it has no why. Science is like a cold machine without any soul. It gives no joy to people except in terms of physical mechanics. And so that can help with survival, but it doesn't feed the spirit at all. It doesn't feed the purpose or the joyfulness of people, and that's why science is very low, even though mechanically it can answer lots of questions, but again, it's how, not why, and that's why it's has some joy, but it's largely empty. And then the average human sits at about 40% in their daily life, because there's so much. They have pleasure, they have joy. I'd say about 40%, but people live controlled lives. Their boss tells them what to do, and they defer their spirit and their soul's purpose to their bosses, to their jobs, to the government. And most people, I would say, are not living largely joyful or free. Everyone has some joy, obviously, but in terms of shining and blossoming completely, I don't think this is a crazy number, 40% for the average person. So that's just a small little list of like how well aligned some of the major factors or topics align perfectly with joy. The joy cosmology obviously is perfect. Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, science, and then the average human. Obviously this one matters most to get this one higher. We don't really need to take any of these other religions with us unless we feel like it, but humanity is objectively important, and making humans joyful is one of the most important things. So that's the overall like current best that humanity has to offer. Just to put it into context, next to our Joynity. Okay, moving on. Alright, now we're going to get more specific into some edge cases, which seem like obvious bads, and relativistically, yes, they're very bad. But as we mentioned in the ontology section, bad as a substance does not exist, and so this is where we'll need some patience and some deep breathing, because this can be triggering even though it's ontologically true. And so we're going to be talking about things that are largely bad, i.e. they do not exist. But if bad cannot exist, then something that on the face of it looks horrible, its good must be so small we cannot see it. And so that's what we're going to dive into, is some edge cases of reality. And explain what they are. Again, this will probably be the most controversial section, but we need to breathe deeply because it can be helpful for people on the edges or for people doing contributive work to help people get out of edge cases. So if we think of, this is like our joy fruit, okay, a circle. And there are some rich areas of joy. Joy, joy, joy. Alright, so that's the place we want to be in this fruit. The thick joy areas, the rich joy areas. But some, let's see, so here's some joy areas where the joy juice is most concentrated. What are some of the worst things that exist out there in common language? Obviously, bad does not exist. We already explained that. But what are some of the worst things that exist out there in the common language, right? So this would be if we're using the light metaphor, like the sun would be super bright, and then out by Pluto it's very dim, and so there's a lot less photons out there. That's what we're talking about. Is where the joy is basically non-existent. But if we can talk about something, there must be some existence there, and so that's where we're going. And so if there's these big joy areas, right, in our joy fruit, where the juice is thick and flowing, where it seems there's none, let's say right there, and right there. Alright, so on the edge of where there's thickness, where it's, let's say there's nothing here, okay? And I'm going to put a picture of a Apollonian gasket, so it's like a visual representation of like how fractals branch in a sphere, right? And so you can see there's some thick areas and then there's some empty areas. And so if there's an empty area where there's zero joy, we can't talk about that because there's just no existence, no reality there. But on the edge of it is where the worst things can exist. And so what are some of the worst things? I would say pedophilia is one of the worst. And what's something else? Poverty is another bad one. And another bad one is war. Those are perhaps the three worst things that are out there, right? And you ask anyone in the world, 99% of people are going to say these things suck. But we said before that bad cannot exist. There's no bad substance. You can't have a handful of bad, right? And so if we can talk about these things, they must not be 100% bad, and I'm not saying they're good at all, but the good is so microscopic that I would say it's about 5 or 6 atoms wide of positive intent. Because even the worst things, like we said earlier with Hitler, the outcomes are horrible. No joy was, or very little joy was created. Basically no joy. But if we can talk about something, there must be some existence to it. Otherwise it'd just be a void and we couldn't talk about it. So if there is some substance there, there must be some joy. And there's not a lot, because these are obvious horrible things. So how much joy is in these things? Again, about 5 or 6. I would put pedophilia as the worst. That has about 5 atoms of positive intention in it. Poverty has about 6, and war has about 6. So this is 5 or 6 atoms wide of joy, which is microscopic and can't sustain anybody, because these are they're joy deserts essentially. So what would those positive intentions be? Again, this can feel triggering, so breathe deeply. This is the most controversial part of this section. So what are the positive intentions of war? We have an acronym, WARHOP. WARHOP. So the W stands for well-being protection. This is, people go to war to secure safety for their self and their group. Okay? That's positive. That's a positive intention. That doesn't mean that it always lands, because war can just be pure destruction, but that is a positive intention of war. The A is affiliation to tribe. So this is deep social identity, connection, relationships. This is another reason why people go to war, which is a positive intention. The R, rights preservation. So this is keeping freedoms and self-determinism. Again, a positive intention. The H is honor, living by a valued code. The O, order, desire for a structured, predictable world. Not a bad thing. People hate war, but order sounds pretty good to most people. The P, progress. War can drive innovation and adaptation. World War II America kind of put America on the map because we were very innovative. Many inventions throughout history have come from war. Most people hate war, but that positive intention can sometimes manifest positive things, right? So again, almost everyone hates war, but I would say there's 6 atoms of positive intent. So that would be 6 Joyicles wide. It's definitely not a rainforest, but it does exist. Alright, so poverty. The acronym we have for this one is SCRAPS. And the reason I'm doing this section is because I want, this is like the shadow of a joy-based reality viewpoint, is the counterexamples. People would say, well, if joy is reality, what about these 3 horrible things, or any other example? And so that's why I feel I have to mention it, because people would say that these are counterexamples that disprove a joy reality. And so that's why I'm bringing these up, to show that it's a short logical chain, really. I say joy is reality. People say these things are not joyful, these are bad. I say, you're right, it does look bad. But if it exists and we can talk about it, it can't be a pure void. It can't be 100% bad. Otherwise, it would just be a void, a blank space that we couldn't talk about. Just like me holding nothing, you can't grab nothing. You can't talk about nothing. So if these exist, they must have some joy in them. Otherwise, they would just be blank sites we couldn't talk about. And so this is me answering that push back, those counter examples, right? But they're obviously not very joyful because they're horrible things. And so if they have joy, which they must if they exist at all, it must be microscopic. And that's why we're talking about these things, because these are on the edge of what a joyfulness is, and right next to a nothingness. True void, true evil can't really be talked about because it doesn't have any existence, it has zero joy. And so these things only have 5 or 6 atoms of positive intention. And so they're basically no good, but they have some positive intentions, and that's the only reason we can talk about them. And so that's why I bring this up, to include even the seeming counterexamples, but they're just on the edge of an absolute void of joy, aka a non-existence. You take one step further from these and there's just nothing. There's no joy. But these at least have positive intents, even though they never land. They're 99.9% non-existent ontologically because there's no joy except for a few positive intentions, which don't land. Again, this is not supporting or encouraging bad things, but being ontologically accurate, even at a microscopic level, because that's how true this joy reality hits. Alright, so with that caveat out of the way, back to scraps for poverty. The 6 positive intentions of poverty. So, is there any positive intention of poverty? Some might say no, it's an inescapable pit of hell that I cannot escape. But anyone who would experience poverty has some positive intentions in it. And so the S in scraps, I would say, is sufficiency. To be contentment, to have contentment with enough. To not be endlessly hungry for other things. The C is community bonds. So this is mutual care between poor people. It's a basis of relationship. The R is resourcefulness. So this is innovation and making do with what you have. Like those kids in Africa building boats out of old Coke cans or old Coke bottles. Like, it's very creative and they're very resourceful. Just one example. The A is authenticity. This is valuing the real over status performance. And so not putting on airs or being pompous or sticking your nose up in the air, but being down to earth and a real person. The P is perspective. So there's awareness of what truly matters. And the way I'm talking about it, you're almost probably, like, I feel it a little bit like, wow, I wish I was more poor. Like, these are some great values. But again, they don't hit very often. They're just pure potential, if you will. They're good intentions, but they don't often land. Because you can definitely have all these things and not be poor. You can be wealthy and have all these things. We're just talking about the intention. So the P is perspective, a great thing, and then the S is sovereignty. So people want to be self-determined and have agency over their own life, and so if you become more successful, perhaps you'll have more responsibilities and have more rules placed upon you. Whereas if you're just a guy living on the beach, perhaps less so, but that's a toss-up as well. But the intention is still there. And so you can see even poverty, which most people would say, I don't want to be poor, I don't want poverty, but it has some good intentions, right? So that's 6 atoms wide. And then the most radioactive, dangerous word of all, pedophilia. Okay. So the acronym here is, how do I do this? Camp Few. So, Camp Few, there's some extra lettering in there just because this one was harder to come up with, but CMPFW. And so with this one, the C is connection. Because what I've found in studying this is pedophilia actually is almost nothing to do with sex. It actually has a lot more to do with emotional needs, failure to launch. 99% of it's men, but it's more about unmet emotional needs and being stuck at often an age where they were molested or abused as kids. And so sex is almost like an afterthought, even though that gets the most airtime because of the harm done to others. But in terms of the actual pedophile, it's more about emotional needs, and so that's where this is going. In terms of what their positive intentions are, again, not condoning, encouraging, supporting in any way. Harm is harm, full stop. We're just talking about understanding, not excusing. So the C is a connection. They're seeking a connection. And it doesn't land. It only causes harm and trauma for others the same way they were traumatized. There's nothing good about it, but the positive intention to connect is there. The M is maturity. Again, they're stuck at an infantile mental development, and so they're not acting at their age, essentially. Again, failure to launch. So they're seeking maturity, which they don't get. They just harm people, but the intention's still there. The P is purity. They're trying to regain their own child sense of purity that they think they lost in childhood through the abuse that they went through, likely. But instead of nurturing it in others, they harm others and try to take others' purity rather than connect to their own. And that's why this is so hated, because it diminishes the net purity instead of increasing it, instead of them connecting to their own, which they have repressed. The F is about feeling better, because they're in such pain from their own trauma that they're looking for any relief. And so they're just seeking to self-soothe, essentially. And then the W, the last one, is worth. Because they feel so worthless all the time, they have no self-esteem, a horrible self-image. They're trying to feel some connection to their own self, to their own self-worth. And so those are the 5 connections. I know that was really challenging to get through that. I feel it. But those are the 5 intentions of pedophiles. And again, this is all 3 of these are on the edge of pure void, pure joylessness, pure non-reality. But if we can talk about something, there must be some joy, and these things are so horrible, you're saying, well, what joy? It must be microscopic, and that's what we just did. It's so microscopic, there's only 6 atoms of positive intention, or joyicles, so to speak, in these 2, and then only 5 here. This is perhaps the worst thing that there is, pedophilia. And so that is some edge cases, and you could talk about any bad thing in the same way. Stuff that looks horrible, and finding, because without the positive intention, the action wouldn't happen. And so in my mind, it's less of a moral judgment and more of a lack of skill. Because if you learned how to connect better, you would connect with people your own age, and pedophilia would disappear completely. And so it's just, if you think of it like a game, they just have low stats at these positive intentions. They don't know, like a pedophile doesn't know how to connect. His mature level is low, his pure level is low. He doesn't feel very good, his feeling good level is low, his worth is very low. Just like in poverty, they're trying to be sovereign, and their sovereignty is very low, their resourcefulness is very low. If they're poor, they're not being very resourceful. Community, if their community level was higher, they wouldn't be poor, because they'd be like helping each other, like in a commune. In war, if people's honor level was higher, they would reject war completely. They would not go to war. They would try to connect with their neighbors and build better relationships. And so you can think about these things as positive metrics, just their skillfulness is shit. So rather than it being like these people are evil, they're almost like they have like they're like mentally disabled almost. They don't have good stats at these positive intentions. They're just, the positive intention is falling flat. Yeah, and so one way, if you have been involved in any of these horrible things, been a victim or whatever, one way to, if it's been an obsession, a negative obsession of your life, if you want to get out of it, you could actually turn these positive intentions of each, turn it into like a gamified system, rate yourself out of 10 in each of the areas, and try to improve your skill at connection or resourcefulness or having more order in your life, and take these positive intentions and get more skilled at them, so you don't fall, so positive intention doesn't fall flat, so you don't get shit results. Just a thought to get you out of that edge case, to bring you back from the desert to the joy rainforest, to get as far away from the void of joylessness and non-reality. So yeah, that is edge cases section. Alright, after that heavy section of controversy and heaviness, darkness, and mostly non-reality, ontologically speaking, joylessness, let's do something a little bit more light, and let's talk about the general joy pyramid. So this is a basic, generalized pyramid of what different activities look like, and something very important and useful in joy embodying, chasing, tracking, whatever you want to call it, is rating things out of 10. And so that's what we're going to use here. It's a very useful metric I learned from the life coaching self-help field. And so we're going to put trauma on the bottom. That's 0 out of 10. Survival next. That's not much better. It's only a 0.5 out of 10. Casual socializing. That's 1 through 3 out of 10. So this is like fulfilling relationships. This is friends and family. That's 3 through 6 out of 10. And this is like spirituality and purpose. Set 6 through 9 out of 10. And then the top is the perfection of joy, which is our Joy Trinity or Joynity. And that's 10 out of 10. So 0 out of 10 joy, that's obvious misery, pain, again, trauma, abuse, war, poverty, some of the edge cases we just talked about. 0 out of 10, right? Or if you want to be ontologically positive or accurate, because we did just say that some of the worst things, they're not true zeros, even though basically they are. You could put like because those things were only like 5 or 6 Joyicles wide, 5 or 6 positive intentions each, you could say it's a 0.05 or a 0.06 out of 10, basically 0. But 0 pretty much accounts for all horrible things, right? Survival, so this is money, this is sex, food, house. It's just basic survival, just maintaining life. Doesn't give you any transcendent experience, it's just maintaining the body, continuing your biology, TV I would put in here is just basic comfort, nothing significant or important happening here. Casual socializing 1 through 3, so this is conversations you have in public with strangers. Nothing super meaningful, but it's you're interacting with people. There's some joy there. Friends and family 3 through 6. So this is more satisfying social, relationships and connections. But I wouldn't put it at transcendent, even though in terms of common human life, this is one of the best. A lot of people live at the survival level. They think in terms of their trauma, and then they just try to survive and maybe socialize a little bit with their coworkers. But that's all basic kind of lower stuff. But friends and family, in terms of common world experience, that's often the highest a lot of people get. But then 6 through 9, that's more of philanthropy, volunteering, going to church, a spiritual practice, meditation, thinking about God, thinking about your values, what you value in life, love, joy, all that kind of stuff. This is the pinnacle. Very few people stay and maintain there. There's some of the best stuff, right? Spiritual, contributing to your community, saving someone from harm, reducing harm, doing therapy work on someone, helping someone heal some trauma. Bringing people out of trauma can be a very joyful thing. But then the only 10 out of 10 thing I would say is a perfect joy, a pure joy. And that's what this whole cosmology is. It's 100% focused on perfect joy. In fact, saying that all of reality, even other universes and the higher dimensions where universes come from, matter itself, all of it is made 100% of joy. That's the Joyicles. And so this philosophy, cosmology, whatever you want to call it, is a perfect 10 out of 10 because it's pure joy based with no dogma, no extraneous things. You don't need to learn 1,000 years of history like in Hinduism or Islam or Christianity. It just gets right to the steak. There's no appetizers. All the stuff, only of what you want, none of the stuff you don't want. And so this is just a casual guide to the 0 through 10 rating scale of joy, which can help you organize and structure your life in a more joyful way, so you're more conscious of it and not just staying at survival, making money, watching TV, sleeping, having casual conversation with coworkers, but connecting with people deeply, having a spiritual practice, and at the best, seeing all of reality as joyful and made of joy. Nothing's better than that. So that's the general pyramid, 0 through 10 joy. Yeah. A little bit of levity in this one. Somewhat related to this, this is a bit of a tangent because it's not purely Joynity dogma or whatever in the perfect joy model, but it can be an interesting for the more casual disciples of this, Joyicles of this belief system, whatever you want to call it. And I call it the BGT, the Big Good Theory. And so what the Big Good Theory is, it's just a simpler, it's more practical than spiritual or cosmological. Big Good Theory, it's very largely based on the 80-20 rule. And so what it says is that there's big goods, there's small goods, there's small lies, which is another word for bad, but because on ontology, bad doesn't exist, is a small lie instead of a small bad. And then there's big lies. And so big goods would be joynity, relationships, spirituality, community, philanthropy, volunteering, contribution, etc. That's the big goods, the big joys. The small goods would be money, food, sex, TV, small comforts, right? The small lies would be annoyances, small annoyances. So this would be people coughing on you, people standing too close to you, bills, not the biggest thing, but they can be annoying. Just bumps in the road that happen in life. And the big lies, that would be trauma, poverty, war, abuse, depression, blah, blah, blah. So that's the big bad stuff, right? The big lies. And so this is not directly linked to Joynity or the Joy Trinity, but it is a interesting and useful metric. If you don't want to be so spiritual, but you still want to have a more joy-focused life, it's a useful side tangent to the Joynity belief system or cosmology that I thought would be useful to include here. Yeah. So the next section is an app that I built or designed, at least. I didn't actually develop it myself. I had someone else do that. But it's the practicality and the final expression of this whole Joynity viewpoint, metaphysics, cosmology we've been expanding upon here. And it's called the LoveJoy App. And basically it turns this joy-based life into a practical everyday kind of thing. On the surface it looks like a joy tracker or a goal tracker, but by using it, it basically makes it impossible to feel bad because it so reinforces the joy cosmology that only joy exists, that it puts joy at the center of your life and makes it essentially impossible. It gives not even a square inch of space for any unreality, aka bad misery, to exist, and that's what's so valuable about it. I'll throw a picture up of it. Basically, you can see the bar on the side, and that's your joy out of 10, where you feel you are at in your life right now, not just in a passing mood, but your life overall in general. You can add a profile picture, and when you create the account, you can build a name. And so at the top right, that's where you can click to chain to sliding scale where you feel your life is out of 10 right now in terms of joy, which again is the goal of goals, is the only goal, it's the only purpose, it's the only reality. And so instead of measuring in terms of net worth or how many friends you have or how externally successful you seem, all those things are just means to joy. And so the only real metric in life is how joyful you feel. And so that's where this app encourages you to stay focused on the only thing that matters, that's your joy. And so you can change how joyful you feel in general over your life. Again, not about a fleeting mood, but how you actually feel overall in your life. The top, so there's two main squares here. The top one is joy 10 out of 10. So this is where you build your concept of what a perfect life looks like. If your life was a 10 out of 10 joy, what would it be included in there? And so here you can hit the little plus sign and add items to it to flesh out what your 10 out of 10 joy life looks like. Again, this is a lot better than building a life in reaction to trauma or past pain or fleeting emotions or thoughts that you've had, because all those are detours. If joy is the only goal and a 10 out of 10 joy is the only life we want, then build it directly and consciously and explicitly, so you don't go on a 10, 20-year detour, perhaps going to school, getting a doctorate, when that was a 1 out of 10 joy for you, just because other people said you should get a doctorate, you know? Like, you don't want to waste things just reacting to trauma or pain. You want to focus squarely on joy and only do that. Like, if you feel like hanging out with someone who's only a 2 out of 10 joy, or you could start building something that is a 10 out of 10, just because you have done something in the past, that's not a good reason to do it, or because hanging out with that person heals a little bit of trauma in my life. If it's not a 10 out of 10, it's a detour. You shouldn't settle for anything besides a 10 out of 10. And so that's why we try to make it explicit, so that your only goals are 10 out of 10 joys. And so in the first square here, build that 10 out of 10 life, and so you know what it looks like. And then whatever your level is currently, let's say you're a 3, a 5, a 7, whatever, it doesn't matter. In the second square, you hit maintain and add items to this section. This is how you maintain your current joy level. And so if you're going to the gym twice a week, if you're eating salad during the week, if you're trying to eat more blueberries or multivitamins, or call my mom once a week, or once a day, whatever it is, however you maintain your current level, you put that here so you don't lose it while you're making the shift in your life to make it more 10 out of 10. You want to maintain the joy you've got while building a 10 out of 10 life. So that's what that is. At the bottom, there are 2 buttons. There's the world icon, and that's where you can see the average of all users. And so it looks exactly like a user page, except it shows the joy bar out of 10 for all the users averaged out. So what the average human looks like, so you can measure yourself against the world and see how well the world's doing, because other people do matter. You can also see what the top items in each section are. What the superstar item is, you can superstar one item in your 10 out of 10 life to make it your top priority. And so you can see what humanity's superstar item is, generalize what the world sees its perfect life as, and how the world is maintaining its current level of joy, which is exciting and fun to see how the world is doing. The information button also can share some of the stuff we've talked about here, the 6 joyful truths, the triangle diagram, how to use the app. At the bottom, you can also see the privacy policy and delete account buttons. If we go back to the user page, you can see at the top there's a couple things. There's a word cloud, and then there's a couple hearts. So the word cloud, let's talk about the hearts first. So this is the social side. So the rest of the app is about you and your tracking joy, but this is like social support. And so you can send love to others through reviews. How I think about it, the original idea was it's Yelp for people and only positive. And so you can send love reviews to people and tell them how awesome they are and everything you love about them, and then they can send the same to you. And so it builds a network of social support, and everyone is encouraging and reinforcing only the strengths and best qualities of each other. And all of those love reviews go into your word cloud, so you can instantly see the top traits or qualities, things that people love about you and that you love about others. And it builds a positive self-concept, self-image, increases self-esteem and confidence. Because a lot of us wonder, like, how does my personality land on other people? What do people love about me? What do I love about other people? And so this cuts all the coyness and the flirtation of how do people feel about me? How do I feel about others? And it just makes it explicit, like, this is what I love about you, and this is what other people love about me. And so it gives a clear mirror to how our personalities land on others, and so it makes us feel like we know what's good about ourselves and what shines most in other people's eyes, which there's no hate, there's no criticism, there's only the love. And so it makes it easy to love yourself when you see, well, I've got like 12 people who say, like, I'm a really good listener and I have a great sense of humor. Like, you can start having a positive self-concept that is verified through external evidence. And so that's the social support and the love network of that is super helpful and useful, I think, to a lot of people. And so that's the gist of the LoveJoy app. And I think we have a little bit more, and then we're almost done. So the last thing I wanted to say after explaining the app is nobody needs it. Nobody needs the app because Joynity, the Joy Trinity, is reality. It's ontologically certain fact, like nothing else could even be more true. Like, is reality just particles? That does not make my heart sing, so that's probably not true. Is reality a test for the afterlife, like Christianity says? That doesn't make my heart sing either, so I don't think that's true either. What is the most joyous, what is the best thought that I could think of? Reality is entirely made of joy. That makes my heart sing. That feels more true. So if everything is already made of joy, then everyone is already doing and living the Joynity reality, right? No one needs to be converted or convinced. Nothing needs to be changed or fixed. If reality is actually just made of joy, then what do we have to change? Like, we're already living in Joytopia, literally. So Joynity, it already is. It just is. Everyone is made of joy. The world is too. All action, that was the first joyful truth, all action already is joy. No matter what it seems like on the surface, if nothing else, at least the intention behind it is positive and joy based, even if it's only 5 or 6 atoms of joy across. No matter what's going on in the world, it's only joy. And so the app, it just makes that explicit and nurtures and fosters it like watering a garden. It's an assistant to help us, but nobody needs the app because Joynity actually is true, and everyone is entirely made of joy. All action is joy. The world is only made of joy. So nothing has to be changed. No one needs help. Everything actually is good, and that's kind of a crazy thought in a very, on the surface, chaotic, muddy world. But if we believe the 6 joyful truths and they are ontologically based, it doesn't just mean that it is true, but it has to be true. And it could not be any other way. Then joy is reality. And so if Joynity is true, we don't need an app, but it can make it more explicit. And everything's actually already good. Nothing has to change. No one needs anything. The world doesn't have to change. Everything is already good. And not just that it is, but it has to be, and it could not be any other way. Joy is the only way that reality could exist, otherwise it wouldn't be real. Joy is the best state, thus it must be everything. And the 6 joyful truths are the logic chain to help people understand that, but it seems obvious on the surface. No one needs this to be explained to them. Everyone's already doing it. So all is well, and I just want to help people see that, to love themselves more, to appreciate the good that already exists, because it is infinite joy in the world, and joy is the only thing in the world. Joy monism, there's only one substance, and it could not be any other way. I think that's awesome to know, and I think other people would like to hear it. But that's my whole TED Talk explanation of Joynity, the Joy Trinity of Joyicles, Joy Tree, and Joytopia, our physical reality, which is only made of joy. I hope it was insightful, and I hope it made your heart sing, and I hope you always remember it, because you are made of joy, and there's only one substance in reality, and that's joy, and that's what you're made of. So have a good life, y'all.